Patel of the Technical Connection Division. The purpose of this session is to share with you some general financial planning tips in light of the current state of affairs, or should I say COVID-19. It's really important to remember that I'm not going to be taking you through planning aspects as such, but rather just taking you through some tips that your clients could be doing at the moment. So things like what they should be taking account of, what their income and expenses are, keeping records, the importance of wills and powers of attorney, and then I'll finish with some general tax planning ideas. Now is a really good time to take stock of your assets and liabilities. So think about what assets you own and how you own them. For most individuals, a lot of assets tend to be owned jointly, and this tends to be with their spouse or civil partner. And effectively, what this means is that on first death, these assets will pass to the survivor, free of any inheritance tax. How about assets that are owned with someone else though? So maybe you own an asset with an adult child. Here, it's important to consider the tax implications on the death of one person in these circumstances. Also, think about any business assets that you may own or partnership interests. Are there suitable plans in place to ensure that these assets are dealt with appropriately on one of the partner's deaths? Do you own any shares, stocks or other collectives like unit trusts? Have you got details of when these assets were acquired and for how much? It will be really important to have this information in order to work out any future tax liabilities. In addition, are there other investments you hold, investment bonds or EISs, VCTs, etc.? It's important again to have details of these assets, the values and when you acquired them, who the providers are. Now is also a really good time to assess your overall cash situation. Especially for those who are currently unable to work, it's important to ensure that they have a rainy day fund available, or whether they need to move funds or obtain funds from certain investments, and if so, where best to take these funds from. Is it possible for them to take them in a really tax efficient manner? Alternatively, are they going to be faced with paying certain taxes? With your assets then comes your liabilities. Consider what debts you have, and these might be credit card debts, mortgages or other personal loans. Consider what rates of interest you may be paying on these. At present, many banks are offering extra support, so it's important to check with your bank what help is being offered. In addition, banks and mortgage providers are also offering payment holidays, so again, it's worth contacting lenders directly to assess your own situation. It might be that at the moment you might consider, for example, remortgaging, depending on the type of mortgage you have, especially given that the Bank of England has slashed interest rates on mortgages to 0.1%. Following on then from assets and liabilities, now is a good time to make a list of your various sources of income and expenses. Given that different sources of income are taxed differently, it's important to have an understanding of how that applies to your personal situation. So consider income from earnings, profits from a partnership, property income, pension income, interest income, dividend income, etc. All these sources of income are taxed in a particular order with specific rates applicable, so it's worth having a general understanding of how that applies to you. When considering your overall income situation, now may also be a good time to consider whether you're eligible for any benefits. So, for example, those who are self-employed and have been advised to self-isolate could be entitled to employment and support allowance from day 1 instead of day 8 as announced in the spring budget. Banks are also offering loans under the government's Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme. Note, we have been producing lots of supporting material for employed as well as self-employed individuals on TechLink, and the support available in relation to the impact of COVID-19. If you haven't seen this material, please do have a look on TechLink. Moving on then to expenses. Now's possibly also a good time to think about general spending. Given that we are currently social distancing, we'll find ourselves saving where we wouldn't have otherwise done so. For example, meals out, going to the cinema, or other days out. If you're not travelling to work, then this could also find you saving some money. However, working from home will mean that utility bills are likely to be higher than normal. So now might also be a good time to get your household finances in order. Consider whether it's worth switching utility providers. And with so many of us currently working remotely, is it time to also review your current broadband package? Finally, any savings you are making, you may wish to think about whether you wish to invest at the current time. We know that the markets are low, however, buying cheap can help smooth out future returns. So having gone through assets and liabilities and income and expenditure, here comes a real important step. It is vital that you retain relevant records and documents of everything, and these are kept in a safe place. This goes from simple records of who you bank with, bank account numbers, bank addresses, etc., and exactly the same for all your other investments. With regards to your pension, have you completed your pension nomination forms in accordance with your wishes, or do any changes need to be made? Have you made any lifetime gifts? Have you kept a record of the amounts you have gifted and who these were made in favour of? If you have been gifting under the normal expenditure out of income exemption, have you kept sufficient records of this? Our advice would be to keep these records using Form IHT 403, which enables you to set out all your various income sources and your expenses to then determine how much you could potentially gift under this exemption without jeopardising your general standard of living. A copy of the IHT 403 form is available from the HMRC's website. Also think about whether or not you've set up any trusts or whether you're acting as a trustee. Have you got copies of the trust documentation? Have you got copies of other supporting deeds, for example, where appointments have been made to beneficiaries, or if trustees have been changed, so deeds of appointment and retirement of trustee? Copies of investment application forms and details of the assets held. In addition, if you've got any life policies or any other insurances, have you got records and documentation in relation to these? What follows then from records and documentation is ensuring that you've got a will and power of attorney in place. Remember, with the power of attorney, of course, you as the individual can continue to act whilst, of course, you are capable of doing so. However, if you haven't set up a power of attorney and you become no longer capable of acting, then it's very difficult for your loved ones to be able to carry out your wishes in relation to financial affairs or your health and welfare. Therefore, it is really important to consider taking out a power of attorney whilst you can. In relation to your will, it's really important to ensure that your will is up to date and it carries out your desired wishes. It's important to note that without a will in place, the law decides who should benefit and inherit your assets on death. Having a will in place also makes things a lot easier for your family and friends to sort everything out when you die. Without a will, the process can of course be quite stressful for your loved ones and also time-consuming. A will can also help reduce the amount of inheritance tax that may be payable, depending on the value of assets that you leave behind. This can be especially important if you have children or other family members that depend on you financially. Especially where you've got minor children, for example, you can ensure that you name specific people who can act as their guardians. Aside from specifying who should inherit and benefit from your asset, A will also name the people, i.e. the otherwise known as the executors, who will be responsible for dealing with your estate. Essentially, these people are responsible for paying any taxes which are due, and they'll be required to apply for probate. Probate is the process whereby it gives them the legal entitlement to deal with the assets within your estate and pass them to the desired individuals. Sometimes a trust may be created under your will, so again, details of how to deal with these assets should be clearly identified in the will. The executors have a responsibility to do their best to carry out your instructions. You can also use your will to tell your executors about other wishes that you may have, for example, funeral wishes, whether you wish to be buried or cremated, whether you want certain songs to be sung. And finally, it is really important to ensure, of course, that your will is legally valid. There's no requirement for your will to be written by a legal advisor, although this is often recommended. Your will be valid as long as it's written while you're in sound mind and able to make your own decisions, and it's signed and dated by you in the presence of 2 adult witnesses. At present, there is consultation going on, and you will see that we have written about this on TechLink with regards to people that are self-isolating in terms of witnessing the will. If you haven't seen these bulletins on TechLink, now's probably a good time to take a look. With the start of the new tax year, now is a great time to think about planning for the year ahead. Consider maximising use of your personal allowances, so your personal income tax allowance, as well as whether or not you could benefit from the £5,000 savings rate band, the personal savings allowance and your dividend allowance. Are your investments structured in a tax efficient manner to ensure that you're making use of all of these allowances? What follows then is the capital gains tax exemption. Again, there are many individuals that don't always make use of this exemption. So again, it's worth looking at your current investments and the way in which your portfolios are structured to ensure you're also able to make use of the CGT annual exempt amount. Maximising your pension contributions where possible is a given for everyone with regards to financial planning. Consider maximising your ISA subscription limits, and also note that the junior ISA subscription limit has increased to £9,000, and equally that also applies for child trust funds. Think about whether or not you're planning to make any gifts and using the IHT exemptions. The £3,000 annual exemption, if you didn't use it in the previous tax year, it is possible to use it now. However, you need to use the current year's exemption first and then use last year's exemption. Think about making use of the small gifts exemption of £250, which is not restricted in terms of how many gifts that can be made. So in other words, you can make any number of mini £250 gifts in favour of numerous individuals. The only point to bear in mind is you can't combine that with the annual exemption of £3,000. Is anyone likely to be getting married? Is that another exemption that you could potentially use, or making gifts to charity or for national benefit? Are you in a situation where you might be able to start using the normal expenditure out of income exemption? On TechLink, we've got a tax health check available, which essentially enables you or your clients to answer some questions and thereby provide some planning opportunities to ensure that all of these allowances and exemptions are maximised. And on that note, I'm going to end with a quote. "In the midst of every crisis lies great opportunity," by Albert Einstein. Thank you very much for listening.